Hey everybody, how's it going? So, I've been discussing the Paycheck Protection Program from a business owner's point of view for the past several weeks, trying to apply for it, just like seeing what the banks tell people, what the application process is like, what the guidelines are, how those guidelines were very vague and then change, and I've shared with you some of the general frustration just going throughout this entire process. Now, one of the bits of pushback that I've been getting is that, the banks were, they weren't, it's not like anybody can ever be prepared for this. This is something where they're not really making much money off of it. They're not really happy that they're having their arm twist to be included in this program. And I wanted to push back a little bit against this idea that, that this kind, generous, benevolent bank is just doing this as a, because Steve Mnuchin asked them to as a favor. If you take a look at this article, it says, Small Business Rescue earned banks $10 billion in fees. Banks handling the government's $349 billion loan program for small businesses made more than $10 billion in fees, even as tens of thousands of small businesses were shut out of the program, according to an analysis of financial reports by NPR. And if you do a little bit of basic fourth grade math, eighth grade if you went to a New York City public school, you'll see that that's 2.86% that they made in fees for loaning out someone else's money. We're not even talking about the fee that they're going to get, but there's the risk involved of them loaning out their own money. Taxpayers provided the money for the loans, which were guaranteed by the SBA. They made 2.85% in 2 weeks, loaning out $349 billion of your money. Let that sink in for a second. Over here, the interesting part is where it says for every transaction made, banks took in 1 to 5% in fees, depending on the amount of the loan, according to government figures. Loans worth less than $350,000 brought in 5% in fees, while loans worth anywhere from $2 to $10 million brought in 1% in fees. So just to give you a bit of perspective here, and again, this is some basic fourth grade math, ninth grade if you went to a New York City public school, is that if for a $350,000 loan, you're looking at the bank getting a fee of $17,500. For a loan to, let's say, Ruth's Chris Steakhouse of $10 million, you're looking at a 1% fee, which is $100,000. Now, if you really do the high-level math, like that 12th grade level math from a New York City public school, if they had loaned the $10 million out to small businesses, then they could have made $500,000 in fees off of that $10 million. By loaning it to large businesses, they make 5 times less. They make $100,000 instead of $500,000 off of that same $10 million. So there is actually some incentive here for banks to have loaned out to small businesses rather than large businesses. And if you take a look at the fee over here, 1% for large business, 5% for small business, and the fee overall comes out to 2.865%, that does mean that the banks loans more to small businesses than to large businesses, but only by a really small margin. It really does come out to like 55-45 here if my math is correct. So what I still think happened here, and this is just my theory, and I'm not the only one who thinks it, given the law firms that are deciding to sue these banks for providing loans to larger customers first rather than doing it first come, first serve, is that even though banks stood to make more money off of the loans by loaning it out to small businesses versus large businesses, it still stands that they could have loaned the money out to large businesses because they were more in debt. So if I go out of business, I leave the bank holding a bag of, let's say, $30,000 to $70,000 for the credit card, because I spend maybe $30,000 to $50,000 a month on my credit card, and then at the end of the month when the bill's there, I pay it. If I go out of business, I don't pay it. Whereas a business like Ruth's Chris that may be $50 or $60 or $80 million in debt is going to leave the bank holding a much larger bag. So if the bank is able to direct a bailout package that they're not even paying for, they're probably going to be incentivized to give that bailout package to the businesses that would leave the bank holding a larger bag, which are the larger businesses. Being a small business, I don't have the capacity to go into debt 10 or 20 or $80 million. But Shake Shack or Ruth's Chris or any of these other publicly traded companies that dared to take out a loan that was designed for small businesses don't tend to trade on New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ, just saying, is that they just wanted to avoid holding the bag. And the part that I got the biggest kick out of in this entire article was a statement that came from Bank of America. The program has significant vetting requirements, the bank said in an email, including collecting, personally examining, and storing data that is required for each application. I repeat that. The program has significant vetting requirements, like collecting, examining, and storing data. If you bought Flux off of my WooCommerce website 7 years ago, I then examined your data when I printed the shipping label and stored that data so that if you called me to ask what your tracking number was because the email went to spam, I could provide it to you. Collecting and storing data is something computers have been doing since the 50s. We've been doing this shit with punch cards. That is not significant vetting. Significant vetting is when you have to figure out if a business is profitable. It's when you figure out, is one particular executive from that business making too much money and leaving none for the business, so if we loan it to them, the business is going to go under and he's going to leave with it. It's figuring out what their assets are. It's not reading your W-3, dividing it by 12, multiplying it by 2.5, and seeing if that number in box 1 of your W-3 matches the amount that you asked for. The only processing that needed to be done here, the only vetting was, is this your social security number? Is this your tax ID? And in your W-3 in box 1, when you divide that by 12 and multiply it by 2.5, does that come out to the amount that you asked for? If yes, rubber stamp loan. If not, then F you. And even in that case, as I said, I did not fill out my loan sheet according to that standard because that was not the fucking standard that the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants even thought you were supposed to fill it out to based on the Treasury Department's initial statements. And I, surprisingly enough, wound up getting approved. What vetting are you talking about? You know, one of the things that I said is that I really genuinely wish that I was wrong with this program, and I was somewhat yes and no wrong. I was wrong in the sense that I thought that I wasn't going to be able to get a dime out of it. But when I speak to my CPA, out of the over 500 people he has that use Chase Bank, I'm the only one that got anything. I don't consider that a win. I really don't consider that a win. I don't know anybody outside of myself that got approved for this that I speak to in my industry or that I know or that I'm friends with or who is a business owner. I don't know anybody but me. If you got something out of this, let me know in the comments down below. I'll believe it. I'll believe that I got it when I actually see it hit my bank account as opposed to getting the email. But this is, I still think that this concept that the banks were doing this charitably, like, you really do have to look at the fee structure here. 2.8% for loaning out other people's money is quite a bit. And when people say that these banks don't have the ability, there's no staff for it, blah, 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 you really need to kind of get an understanding of what banks like Chase are like, at least where I am. I would not open a store 4 blocks away from my existing store because I would consider that redundant. Dare I say, I may consider that overstaffing or an irresponsible use of my business's funds. I may open one store in Jersey, one store in New York, or maybe in different sides of town. If you take a look at what Chase does with it, let's just take a look at Chase Bank and around my zip code here. So if you take a look at Chase Bank, this is obscene. So this is about 1 mile over here. Like, this section is approximately like maybe 1 mile. In 1 mile, one bank, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Look at this. So this is right where my old store used to be. You have a bank over here on 15th Street and 1st Avenue. If you walk 5 blocks over, 1st Avenue and 10th Street, you have another Chase Bank. Now, they actually changed the branding on Washington Mutual, back to the Washington Mutual branding. But believe it or not, if you walked right over to St. Mark's Place, which would have been 8th Street, you have another Chase Bank literally 2 blocks away from this one. So Chase Bank over here, Chase Bank over here. And we're not talking about, blocks in Kansas or something. These are city blocks. I take a 20-second walk from here to here, and you're from a Chase to another Chase. You walk from here to here, which is, even if you're eating at Arby's all day, this is a 1.5-minute walk max, you are at another Chase. If you walk from here to here, you're at another Chase. Here to here, you're at another Chase. Here to here, you're at another Chase. There are Chase banks everywhere in this city. I personally believe that having this many bank locations is somewhat irresponsible because instead of keeping that money saved for a rainy day or using it to save people on fees or paying it out to your employees, you're utilizing that money to just keep opening new locations in one of the most expensive cities in the world. I don't think that someone is making their decision on what bank to use based on the fact that this bank did not have a location once every 2 blocks. People that are on 13th Street, they're able to make the walk over to 10th. You don't have to open another bank on 15th Street. But the thing is, if you're going to have this many bank locations with a full staff at every single one, every 2 blocks, and you're making $10 billion to process these applications, a nice 2.8% fee on someone else's money, it's really hard to buy the idea that we just didn't have the staff to handle this. If it were any other business on earth, I would believe it. But if you need to live in Manhattan, you need to walk the streets and just see how many Chase banks there are every 2 to 3 blocks to understand why it's difficult for business owners that live in Manhattan to understand how it is that Chase was not able to get around to everybody's applications. So that when my banker, who has 500 Manhattan clients that all use Chase Bank, say that they were not able to get a loan, any of them, man, it's just kind of weird, just kind of funny. It's one of those really strange coincidences, given the sheer volume of staff that you have in this city. But what do I know? Anyway, let me know your thoughts down below. I am very interested in the difference in fee structure. I wasn't aware of the difference in fee structure to where if the bank loaned out the money to small businesses, that $10 million will get them $500,000 in fees, but if they loan it out to larger businesses, they get $100,000 in fees. That was a new piece of information thrown into the works. There are 2 ways to interpret it, which is either A, the banks really didn't have motivation to loan out money to larger businesses versus small. They actually had the opposite. Or B, the banks were so worried about becoming insolvent if the largest businesses wound up going under that they would have rather taken less money in fees, less money in profit, simply to prop up businesses that would have left them holding 6, 7, 8-figure bags if they went out of business. I'm just kind of curious. You let me know what you think in the comments down below. That's it for today. And as always, I hope you learned something. That's my kitty. Her name is Blackberry. She's so lovely. She's a good kitty. See y'all next time.